From Mel Hertz, author of Still Here, this is See You in Manila, Episode 1.
I had spent the last few years collecting cities. 3 months in Lisbon, 2 in Bangkok, 6 weeks in Seoul, a few other places in between, some long enough to feel familiar before it was time to leave again. I liked the movement, the anonymity, the strange little routines that became familiar just in time for me to leave them behind. Starting over had never scared me much. There had been women too. Nothing dishonest. Nobody was waiting at an airport wondering why I hadn't come back. I never promised more than I could give, and most of the women I dated understood that eventually one of us would be packing a suitcase. Usually me. But lately, I'd started wondering what it would take to make me stay. Not in a sad way. I wasn't lonely. I liked my life. I just sometimes wondered if there was a person somewhere who could make staying feel more exciting than leaving. For now, though, I was in Boracay on a family trip with relatives from Manila. A suitcase I had somehow managed to overpack and 4 pairs of shoes for a beach vacation. 1 white, 2 black, 1 cream, all necessary. My cousin Enzo stood beside my suitcase, staring at the shoes I had lined neatly against the wall. Enzo lived in Manila. He was gay, opinionated, and one of my favorite people. He pointed at the shoes. "You brought all of those?" "They have different purposes." "You need 4 purposes for shoes in Boracay?" "Depending on the outfit, yes." I pointed toward them one by one. White sneakers, black Birkenstocks for the beach, black loafers for dinner, cream loafers for dinner when black doesn't work. Enzo picked up the cream shoes and looked at it. "If you say so." "Thank you." "That wasn't an agreement," he said, laughing. "I accepted it as agreement." I took the shoe from him and put it back. We were only a few years apart and had spent a lot of summers together growing up. Even after my family moved to California when I was 10, Enzo and I stayed close through phone calls, messages, occasional visits, and eventually the family group chats that seemed to multiply every year. Enzo shook his head and started toward the door. "Let's go, everybody's downstairs." "I have a call in 20 minutes. He stopped. "You're working?" "For 30 minutes. "You're in Boracay." "I'm committed to receiving my paychecks," I said, laughing. Enzo stared at me for a second. "Fine. We're going to the beach after. Don't disappear." "I never disappear." He opened the door. "You literally make a lifestyle out of disappearing." "That feels unnecessarily personal." He laughed and left. I checked the time. My meeting was at 8 that night, which meant it was 8 in the morning on the East Coast. A perfectly reasonable time for them, slightly less reasonable for me. Remote work had made traveling possible. It had also taught me that time zones had no sympathy. The hotel lobby was too busy, so I walked to a small coffee shop nearby and found a table against the wall. Quiet enough. More importantly, the Wi-Fi worked. I ordered an iced coffee, opened my laptop, and joined the call. For the first few minutes, I forgot where I was. That happened often. The screen filled with familiar faces. We talked about a client review, a navigation issue, and whether one part of the interface should move into the next release. I was halfway through explaining why changing something 3 days before delivery was generally a terrible idea when 3 women came into the coffee shop and sat at the table next to mine. I glanced at them and noticed one of them immediately. That was unfortunate. She had long dark hair, warm brown skin, and the kind of composed confidence that made looking away feel unnecessarily responsible. She wore a white sleeveless linen top, loose tan trousers, and simple sandals. Nothing dramatic. I looked once, then again. Fine. 3 times. I turned my attention back to the screen. "Yes," I said. "If we move that component into the next release, we can test the new flow properly instead of rushing it." One of my coworkers smiled. "How's the Philippines?" "Hot," I said, Really hot. San Francisco did not prepare me for this. Someone laughed. I'm serious. I walked outside this afternoon and immediately regretted every clothing decision I made. At least you're in Boracay. That is currently the only reason I'm not complaining more. Someone from the group at the next table started laughing. I glanced over. The woman in white was smiling at something her friend had said. It changed her face completely. The polished calm disappeared for a second, and something warmer showed through. I looked back at my laptop. I'm a professional, a useful concept. Then I heard one of the women beside me say quietly, Andy. The woman in white looked up. Ano? Her friend tilted her head slightly in my direction. Bagay kayo. My hand stopped on the mouse. There are certain advantages to having an American accent. Apparently, people assume you also lose your hearing. Andy laughed softly. Tumigil nga kayo. The woman sitting across from her wasn't finished. Type mo naman. Pwede ba? Hindi ko type no. They laughed again. I kept my attention on the screen. Okay, that was definitely about me. Jess? I blinked. One of my coworkers was waiting. Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Do you think we can have the revision by Thursday? Thursday should be fine. From the next table, another voice said, Tingnan mo kasi. I kept staring at my laptop. Andy answered, Nakikita ko. My fingers paused over the keyboard. Nakikita ko. Excuse me? I allowed myself one glance. Andy was already looking at me. Our eyes met. For maybe 1 second, 2 at most. She didn't look embarrassed. She just held my gaze with the smallest hint of a smile. I looked back at the screen, very calmly. Because I was 29 years old and fully capable of behaving professionally, while a beautiful woman discussed whether I was her type 3 feet away from me, mostly. Yes, I said. I think that works. I had no idea what I had just agreed to. Fortunately, nobody asked a follow-up question. The meeting ended a few minutes later. I said goodbye, removed my headset, and closed the laptop. The women beside me were still talking. Apparently, the subject had changed. Probably safer for everyone. I finished my coffee and slipped the laptop into my bag. One of Andy's friends glanced toward me. Sayang, she murmured. Aalis na. I stood and reached for my bag, holding onto the back of the chair beside me as I stepped around the table. Then I looked over at them. Just so you know, I perfectly understood what you guys were saying. Silence. Beautiful, complete silence. The friend nearest me covered her mouth. The other one looked down at the table. Andy closed her eyes for half a second. I tried not to smile. Medyo, I added. Andy looked up at me. This time, she was definitely trying not to laugh. Have a good night. Then I walked out. I was maybe 30 feet from the coffee shop when I heard the group burst out laughing behind me. I started laughing too. The next afternoon, Enzo texted me and told me to meet them by the beach at Station 1. By the time I got there, my relatives had already claimed several chairs beneath 2 umbrellas. Somebody had ordered food. Somebody else was looking for sunscreen that was apparently missing despite there being at least 6 bottles on the table. Are you done working for the week? Enzo asked. Yes. Good. We're meeting some friends later. Meet us in the lobby at 7. Okay. At 6:55, I was downstairs, showered, dressed, ready, alone. I checked my phone. Nothing. At 7:15, people finally started appearing. My aunt, 2 cousins. Then Enzo looking completely unbothered. I looked at him. You said 7. It's only 7:15. He laughed. Relax, dude. I've been here since 6:55. That sounds like a personal problem. Exactly. Go have a drink. I could have still been upstairs. But you're not. Enzo shook his head. You're in the Philippines, Jess. You should know this by now. You've lived in how many countries in the last few years? Enough to know 7 usually means 7. Not here. Apparently. He was still laughing when he suddenly looked past me. Andy? I turned. So did she. The woman from the coffee shop stood several feet away with the same 2 friends who had been sitting beside her. Seeing her again caught me off guard more than it should have. For 1 second, neither of us said anything. Then one of her friends started laughing. Enzo walked toward Andy and hugged her. What are you doing here? Vacation, she said. You didn't tell me you were coming. I didn't know you were here either. Then Enzo turned toward me. This is my cousin Jess, he said, from San Francisco. Andy looked at me. We've sort of met. You have? Enzo asked. No, Andy said quickly. Yes, I said at the same time. Her friends started laughing again. Enzo looked between us. What happened? Nothing, Andy said. Nothing, I agreed. One of her friends pointed at me. She speaks Tagalog. Enzo looked at her. Yes, enough to cause some trouble. The 2 women immediately started laughing again. A few minutes later, Enzo leaned closer to me. Okay, what happened? Nothing happened. That's twice you've said that, which usually means something happened. I looked toward Andy. She was talking to one of her friends. I was working at a coffee shop last night. They were sitting beside me. And? They heard me talking on my meeting and assumed I didn't understand Tagalog. Enzo looked at me. Oh no. Oh yes. What did they say? Apparently Andy and I were bagay. He started laughing. I know, I laughed too. They also discussed whether I was her type. That made him laugh harder. I hate you. Did you tell them you understood? Eventually. Eventually. I wanted to hear the rest. Enzo stared at me for a second. You're terrible. I know. After that, the 2 groups became one without anyone formally deciding it. That was how Filipino vacations worked. You started with 6 people, somebody found a cousin, somebody else knew somebody from college, and suddenly dinner required 3 tables. I learned that Andy had gone to the University of the Philippines with Enzo. I also learned that she worked in corporate brand strategy in Manila, although she brushed past the details so quickly that corporate brand strategy was about all I got. At dinner, one of her friends asked if she planned to do any work the next day. I'm on vacation, Andy said. Her friend looked at her. You answered emails at the beach. 1 email. You opened your laptop. Andy took a sip of her drink. That was a lapse in judgment. I laughed. She gave me a look that said, Really? You? Okay, she had a point. That was different, though. Of course it was. I narrowed my eyes at her. She smiled. That was when I realized Andy was funny too. Great. Another thing to like. Over the next 2 days, we all kept ending up together. Lunch became drinks. Drinks became dinner. Someone suggested swimming. Someone else suggested an island tour. Nobody agreed on anything until somehow everybody was already doing it. Andy and I kept drifting toward each other. Not obviously. At least I didn't think it was obvious. Enzo disagreed. You know I can see through you, right? He asked one afternoon. We were walking behind everyone else toward the beach. The others had gotten far enough ahead that their voices blended with the sound of the water. I don't know what you're talking about. Enzo stopped walking. Jess. I kept going for another few steps before turning around. What? You've been checking her out. I glanced toward the group ahead of us. Andy was walking beside one of her friends, holding her sandals in one hand. The wind kept blowing her hair across her face, and every few steps she pushed it back without breaking whatever story she was telling. I had, in fact, been checking her out. I met her 2 days ago, I said. That wasn't my question. I glanced at him. I think she's attractive. Enzo gave me a look. You think plenty of women are attractive. That is unfairly accurate. We started walking again, but Enzo didn't laugh. Andy is my friend. I looked at him. The teasing was gone. That got my attention. I know. I mean it, he said. So do I. She's not into casual. Something in me tightened at the word casual. It wasn't inaccurate. I just didn't particularly like hearing Enzo apply it to me while Andy was walking 20 yards ahead. I haven't asked her for anything. I know, he said. We walked a few more steps. Then Enzo added, Good. I stopped. Good? Keep it that way. That irritated me more than it should have. I don't lie to women. I didn't say you do. You're making me sound like I leave a trail of broken hearts across a few continents. Enzo smiled slightly. No, you're honest. You tell people exactly who you are. Thank you. And then you leave. Andy isn't looking for something temporary. That took some of the fight out of me, because there wasn't much to argue with. I did leave. Lisbon, Bangkok, Seoul, wherever came next. Nobody had ever been surprised when I packed my suitcase. That had always been part of the deal. But for some reason, looking at Andy walking ahead of me, the arrangement suddenly sounded different when Enzo said it out loud. Enzo bumped his shoulder lightly against mine. I like you, cuz. Debatable. And I like Andy, he said. I know. That's all I'm saying. He walked ahead. I stayed where I was for another second, watching him catch up with the others. Then Andy turned around from farther down the beach. You coming? I looked at her. Enzo's warning was still sitting somewhere uncomfortable in the back of my mind. Yeah, and I went. That evening, most of the group stayed near the resort bar. Andy and I ended up walking along the beach after dinner. Not intentionally. At least that was the story we both seemed willing to accept. The white sand was cooler beneath my feet, and the noise from the restaurants faded as we moved farther down the shore. For a while, we talked about nothing important. Food, travel, the fact that Enzo had apparently been dramatic since birth. Then Andy asked, How long are you staying in the Philippines? A couple more weeks, maybe. She looked at me. Maybe? I'm flexible, I said. You don't know when you're leaving? I know approximately. Andy gave me a skeptical look. That sounds stressful. It's freedom. Andy glanced at me. That sounds like something people say when they're afraid of commitment. I laughed. That's a lot of judgment from someone I met 2 days ago. Observation, she said. That's what we're calling it? She smiled. We kept walking. Where are you going next? She asked. I don't know yet. You really just decide? Usually. And work doesn't care? As long as I get things done. Andy looked toward the water. I don't think I could do that. Travel? Live without knowing where I'll be 3 months from now. I like it. I can tell. There was no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. I told her about Lisbon and some of the other cities. About the month in Mexico City that accidentally became 3. Andy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Enzo already warned me about you." I looked at her. "He what?" "Don't get mad at him," Andy said. "We went to college together. We've been close for years." "What exactly did he say?" "That you travel, you date, and then you leave." That makes me sound so terrible. "He also said you're honest about it." That's slightly better. Andy smiled. "Everybody knew what it was," I said. "I know. He told me that too." We walked in silence for a few moments. Then Andy looked at me again. "So you have girlfriends in multiple time zones?" That makes it sound like I maintain an international schedule. Do you? No? Good, that sounds exhausting. I smiled, she did too. But something had shifted. Not badly, just enough for me to notice. Andy was careful. I had already seen it in little ways. She was the one who counted heads before everyone left somewhere. The one who noticed when one of her friends had gotten too much sun and quietly handed her water. The night before, when one of the women in the group drank too much, Andy stayed with her until she was safely back in her room. She didn't announce any of it. She just did it. Maybe that was why Enzo had warned me. And maybe that was why, for once, I wasn't trying very hard to get anywhere. I was enjoying where we were. On our last night in Boracay, everyone stayed out late. Eventually, people began disappearing in 2s and 3s. My aunt went upstairs, then my cousins. Enzo left with 2 friends to find food despite having eaten less than an hour earlier. At some point, Andy and I ended up alone near the beachfront. The beach was quieter. The water was almost black beyond the lights. We sat on a low concrete ledge at the edge of the sand, facing the ocean. Behind us, the noise from the restaurants had softened to a distant hum. "You leave tomorrow?" she asked. "For Manila. And then San Francisco? In about a week?" She nodded. I looked at her. She was barefoot again, her sandals beside her. The breeze caught her hair, and she reached back with both hands, gathered the long strands, and pulled them over her left shoulder. I watched her do it. Probably a little longer than necessary. I had wanted to kiss her more than once that week. I knew enough to recognize when someone wanted me too. Andy had looked at my mouth. I had caught it. She had caught me doing the same thing. Normally, that would have been enough, but nothing about this felt like something I wanted to rush through just because I knew how. "You're very quiet right now," she said. "I'm capable of it." "I haven't seen much evidence." "That's rude." Andy smiled, then the smile softened. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could have moved closer. I almost did. Andy looked at me. I looked at her. The moment sat there between us. Easy. Possible. Then she glanced toward the hotel. "I should go." A small part of me was disappointed. A surprisingly large part. "Yeah," I said. She stood and picked up her sandals. "Good night, Jess." "Good night, Andy." She took a few steps, then turned back. "See you around, Nomad." I smiled. "Maybe." "And for the record..." "What?" "You do speak Tagalog." I smiled. "Thank you." "Like a 4th grader." My mouth fell open. Andy laughed and kept walking. "Grabe ka," I called after her. She lifted one hand without turning around. I watched until she disappeared inside. Then I stayed there for a while. I should have been disappointed that I hadn't kissed her. I wasn't... Not exactly. I was disappointed that the week was over. That surprised me more. Usually, leaving was easy. A city ended. A trip ended. A woman became someone I remembered fondly from somewhere else. That was how my life worked. I had gotten very good at goodbye. But sitting there on that beach, listening to the water and thinking about a woman I had known for less than a week, I found myself wishing for something I usually never asked for. More time. To be continued.